Hey, First Baptist Pelham, this is Jonathan Mosley. I'm a missionary in Boston. Thank you for allowing me to be able to speak to you guys for a little bit. I first came to know Jesus Christ back in high school. I grew up big time sports player. Played baseball, basketball, football, soccer. That was really what I lived for. Everything else kind of revolved around that. My dad was my coach in all of those sports. But then high school hit, and I threw up my arm. Basically, the doctor said I would never really be the same player again. And the dreams that I had set for my life were to go to college and play college ball, and hopefully even beyond that. And so those were my, self-centered dreams, so to speak. But God ripped those from me in high school, and really kind of hit rock bottom. And that's when I was invited to go to a church and heard the gospel. Now, I had gone to several churches that preached the gospel, but I never had ears to hear it, and heard the good news of Jesus Christ, where He died to take away my sin so that I could be in a relationship with Him. And I needed that. I realized that my pursuit, my dreams, did not have God at the center. They had me at the center. And I heard that message, realized I want this relationship with God. I need my sins forgiven. And that's when God changed my heart back in high school. And it wasn't long after that where I really felt God calling me into ministry. I had seen how God was beginning to change my life, and God was changing the lives of my friends around me. And this is really what I wanted my life to be about. And so that also came in high school. Now, when I went to college, I went to the University of Georgia. Go Dogs, right? And was a religion major there. When I went to college, got plugged into this incredible church, and the college pastor always said the same thing to us. He said this. He said, "Do something you love for the glory of God, but do it somewhere strategic for the mission of God." So, no matter what vocation you're in, do it with your best work. Put all of your mind and heart into it, and do it with the motivation of bringing God a lot of glory. But use your vocation, leverage your vocation in a strategic place, in a place that is gospel dry, right? If you think about a football field, right? There might be sections of that field that is growing, very green, and sections of that field that might be very, very dry. Well, if I have the Holy Spirit inside of me, I have the Bible describes it as living water flowing from me. Well, let me spend my life, let me pour out my life in the area where the grass is dry, brown, not green. Let me go somewhere that needs really the people of God to pour out their lives into it. So I was thinking about where is that strategic place for me? Where should I go to pour out my life for the glory of God? And Boston kept coming up time and time again. I couldn't get away from being drawn to that city. Boston is 3% Christian. So if you were to line up 100 people along the church building, or along the street, or wherever you're at, right? If you were to line up 100 people in a row, and if you were to say, "Hey, if you're Christian, step forward," 3 out of those 100 people would identify as Christian. The other 97 would identify as either Muslim or Buddhist or Hindu. Many of them are atheists. They don't even believe in God at all. And so Boston kept coming up as far as, maybe this should be where I moved to. It was hard for family. I'm originally from Georgia. I lived in Columbus, and my dad would always ask, why go to Boston? There's lost people right here, and which he's right. There are lost people in Columbus, but I remember talking. My dad's a banker, so he likes when we talk numbers. So I remember just telling him, I said, "Dad, imagine you were to drive into a grocery store parking lot. We have a local neighborhood grocery store called Piggly Wiggly. So Dad, imagine you were to drive into that neighborhood grocery store, and you get out of the truck, and there's two elderly ladies that walk out of the store. And one lady is holding two grocery bags in her hand. She's struggling to get to her car. She could use the help. But there's another lady that has 10 bags in her hand. And same thing, you see her struggling and she needs the help. You have the opportunity to get out of the car and go help one and carry the groceries to her car. Only one. Which one do you help? The one with 2 bags or the one with 10 bags? He said, well, I guess I'd go and help the one with 10 bags. And I said, well, why would you do that? And he said, well, because the one with 10 bags is the one in greater need. And I said, Dad, that's why I really feel called to Boston. It's not that Columbus doesn't need help. It's just the fact that Boston is in greater need. When you think about a city that's 3% Christian, and something else that really drew me to the city was the passage in Luke 15. It really lays out God's heart for those that are lost. It's actually the only time in Scripture where God brings home one point in 3 different stories. So back to back to back, Jesus is hitting that he came not for the healthy, but he came for the sick. He came for the lost. You have a character that's going after a lost sheep. That's the shepherd there, and one of the sheep has run away. The 99 is in the field. The one has wandered off, and that shepherd goes and finds that one sheep. And then you have a lady in a house who has 10 coins. She loses one, and she searches that house up and down to find that lost coin. And then you have the lost son. And really it's the lost sons in this story, but a lot of the attention is given to the prodigal son who runs away, and it's a father. It's a father who every single day is looking to see if his son's going to return. And every time something is found, the sheep, the coin, the son, there's great rejoicing in heaven. And that passage teaches me that what heaven cares a lot about, what brings heaven happiness, is seeing those that are far from God coming into a life-giving, eternal relationship with God as our Father. And so if that's what heaven cares about, if that's what God cares about, that's what I want to make my life about. And God really put Boston on the radar in terms of where he wanted me to share this good news of Jesus, to bring those far from God into a relationship with him. And so that's why Boston. I've heard Boston described like this, and I think it's true, that you have Washington, D.C. as you could say, the political capital of the world. What happens in the White House has effects all around the globe. But the same is true for New York City. It's not that it's the political capital of the world, it's the financial capital of the world. What happens on Wall Street has global effects on economies all around the world. So you have DC as the political capital, New York City as the financial capital. And I think you could say, pound for pound, Boston is the cultural capital of the United States. But not just the United States, of the world. The ideologies that get grounded in Boston tend to spread all throughout the world. If you think about this, the tech bigwigs and the Supreme Court justices, the lawyer bigwigs, they may not live in Boston, but they were educated in Boston. Think about Mark Zuckerberg, inventor of Facebook. At one point, every Supreme Court justice was educated in the city of Boston. That's not true now. There's been new Supreme Court justices nominated and elected to the bench. But when it comes to a city that is guiding the morality of a nation and the world, and when you have people that are some of the smartest and brightest coming to Harvard and BU and creating companies and social media connections that change the very fabric of a nation, those people are coming out of Boston. And so what could it look like if a church said, we're going to try to reach this city, knowing that it's going to have ripple effects across the country? And it's not just, ideologies that are coming out of Boston, but you have 1 in every 3 world leaders that come over to the city of Boston to get educated. And so, I mean, for where we're at in Mission Hill, Northeastern, that's a school close by. It's, I think, in the top 10 when it comes to the number of international students that come over here to get educated. And so, if you want to reach the nation, the world, Boston is one of the best places to do that. So that's why we felt called to the city, and I have absolutely loved it. I've been here now 8 years. Boston was never a place that I just fell head over heels over. It was more of a love that grew over time. I'm a Georgia boy, so I'm used to that. I'm used to flying into Atlanta and that wave of heat and humidity hitting me, and I love that actually, compared to the winters here they start sometime like late October and can end all the way in May. I think this year we had a snowstorm in May. So long, brutal winters, and it's the accent's a little different up here. The pace of life is a lot different up here. Very fast paced, very expensive. So things that I wasn't head over heels, but God through the years has given me a big love for the city of Boston. Now, when we moved here, the question was, really felt called to start a church. And the question was where. And I kind of felt like Acts 16. Paul, he's figuring out what course he wants to take to share the gospel. And Paul is thinking one place and God shuts the door. And then he's thinking another place and then God shuts the door. And finally he's led over to this church, over to this region of Philippi. And here's this Macedonian man crying out in a dream, and Paul says, "Okay, we're going to go over there." And the backstory of the book of Philippians is actually found in Acts 16. And so we just felt ping ponged, right? We said, "Well, what about here?" And then God shut the door. Quincy. What about Somerville? And God shut the door. And finally, we were led to a place called Mission Hill. And Mission Hill, it's a peanut-sized neighborhood. It's only 3/4 of a square mile long, but packed in this 3/4 of a square mile neighborhood is around 25 to 30,000 people. Around 20-something thousand officially, but then you have, especially international students. They're a lot of them are living in the same place, but no one would really know it, and so the population here is sky high in a really condensed space. And we like to think of this neighborhood as 10-5-5. They're in this small, compact neighborhood. You have 10 colleges within a square mile. So that's wild to me. In Athens, Georgia, there's one. Here, there's 10 colleges within a square mile. There's 5 hospitals that are here as well, and there's 5 low-income housing developments. So when you think about this neighborhood generationally, when it comes to families that are in low-income housing, you have kids, but then you also have residents in Mission Hill that have lived here for decades, and you have college students. So generationally, the spectrum from beginning to end, that captures this neighborhood. But when it comes to ethnicities, we have Puerto Ricans, Haitians, Indians, Moroccans. I mean, you name it. Russians, Chinese people. As far as nationalities and ethnicities, the spectrum is far and wide in this neighborhood. But also, in terms of classes, you have a wide range of people that live here as well. And this is really the vision of our church. We want someone to walk into Kings Hill and see people of all different colors. We want them to see the rich and the poor. And this is really the vision of what the church should be. In the book of James, this is what you have. You have the rich and the poor. Paul talks about what the church should be. It's for the Jew, for the Gentile, the slave, and the free. And so we just want to be a church that brings in all kinds of people. We chose Mission Hill because both me and my wife, we come from families that are broken. Our parents both divorced at young ages, and when you're dealing with the low income demographic, that's typically what you find. And I'm speaking with a broad stroke here, but there is a lot of that you see, and we believe that if broken families are going to see restoration and healing, what they need to see is a healthy family at work, which is the church, God's family. And both of us, our faith exploded in college. And so we get excited thinking about the number of college students that we can reach in this neighborhood, where just like me, where God took away one dream and put in its place something bigger that had God's kingdom in mind, not my kingdom in mind. And so we get excited thinking about reaching college students in that way. Our church, we started the church in September of 2018. So it's still a baby. It's still an infant, right? It's not even 2 years old yet, but we're committed to Boston and to seeing God's name made much of here. Thank you guys for allowing me to share. We could really use prayer in this work. A lot of resistance up here in terms of trying to share the gospel, and a lot of obstacles to overcome in terms of expense and space. Right now, just one prayer is we're not sure when we're going to be able to meet back again as a church, because we meet inside of a school, so we don't really get to make the call if we can come back or not. It's the superintendent of the school system that says that churches can come back. So just there are a lot of obstacles in a city, but could use your prayer, and incredibly grateful for the ways that you guys have come alongside us in this journey. Our ultimate desire is that God's kingdom would come in Boston as it is in heaven. First Baptist Pelham, the Mosleys, we love you guys, and we thank you for the ways that you're making much of God in Pelham, and the ways that you're loving on us and praying for us up here in Boston.